Pros and cons of living in Virginia in 2023. What you need to know right now. Have you thought about relocating to another state, but you're just not sure which one is going to be best for you? Maybe you've thought about retiring soon, or have even already retired, but just want to find an area that better aligns with what you want out of life at this point. Well, about a year ago, we did a video on the pros and cons of living in Tennessee, and that video has been our second most popular video ever, just behind the one where we talk about why so many people are moving to Northeast Tennessee where we live. We decided that it was time to take a look at our neighbor, the state of Virginia, and look into the pros and cons of living there too. We're big fans of Northeast Tennessee, and frankly, we can talk all day about the things we love about living here. For some reason, though, we haven't given Virginia much coverage on the channel. Our hometown of Bristol straddles the Virginia state line, and we're on that side of town all the time. From our house, it might be a 7-minute drive to the Virginia state line, and Southwest Virginia feels like home to us also. So it's high time that we gave Virginia a look. Could Virginia be a good fit for you? Well, it depends on what things are most important to you at this stage in life. To decide, you need to know both the good and the bad. No state's perfect, and each one has their strengths and weaknesses. We're not here to convince you to pack up and move to Virginia, or Tennessee for that matter. Our job is just to share with you what we've learned from decades of living in the area and from the dozens of buyers who we've helped relocate here. If living in Virginia seems to be a good fit for you, great. If not, at least we've helped you make up your mind. So, we have 4 reasons you might not want to call Virginia home and 5 reasons you might just want to move here. So let's start with the cons. The number 1 con, taxes. Being a Tennessee resident, I'm used to lower taxes. You hear about other states with ridiculously high property taxes, income taxes, gas taxes, and more. It's almost like some states want to make it hard for its residents to get by. I don't know how some people make it, honestly. Tennessee is one of several states in the U.S. that has no income tax, but Virginia does. So how does that impact you overall, though? Every other state I've lived in has had an income tax, so I was happy when I moved back to Tennessee to be done with it. But there's a bit of a trade-off. The combined sales tax rate in Tennessee is among the highest in the nation, while Virginia's is much lower. For a quick example, let's compare Johnson City, Tennessee with Abingdon, Virginia. If you're shopping in Abingdon, you pay a 5.3% sales tax. Buying something in Johnson City, you'll pay 9.5%. Sales tax on groceries is 6.5% in Johnson City, but the food tax in Virginia is just 1%. I kind of think that the high sales tax rate in Tennessee isn't as noticeable during daily life as an income tax is. When you look at a pay stub and see X dollars taken out for state income tax withholding, it kind of hurts. However, when I'm in the store buying something, I don't really pay or think too much about the sales tax. It's a lot, but you just accept it. Besides the state income tax, Virginia has a personal property tax on automobiles, which some states don't. The rate is 55 cents per $100 of value, so the number declines with the depreciation of your car. As far as real estate property taxes, in our area, they are very comparable between the 2 states. It depends much more about whether you're living within the city limits or you just pay county taxes than which state you're in. So that one's pretty much a toss-up in our area anyway. Property taxes vary greatly by region, which affects the numbers. The northern part of the state, Virginia, is going to have a much higher property tax, for example, than in our area due to the increase in home prices. So, are taxes a con to living in Virginia? Depends on where you're coming from. According to Wallet Hub, Virginia's total tax burden is 8.2%, which is 16th in the nation when ranking from lowest to highest. In comparison, Tennessee is number 2 at 5.75%. New York is number 50 at 12.75%. But there's one very important thing you should take into account here. These are state averages. The actual impact is going to change depending on what part of the state you look at and your individual tax situation. If income taxes are a concern, be sure to talk to an accountant to give you a better idea of what the direct impact to you will be. So, Virginia has overall higher taxes than its neighbor to the south, but still looks better than 33 other states in the nation. If you're living in New York now, Virginia is looking pretty good. However, taxes are only one factor when making that decision on where you might want to live. Perhaps it's better to look at the overall cost of living, not just the taxes, which brings us to number 2 on our list. Number 2, the cost of living. Virginia, on average, has a higher cost of living compared to other states in the region, particularly in Northern Virginia and the Hampton Roads area in the state. Take a look at this map and you can see how the cost of living varies throughout the state. The darker red colors have higher costs of living, while the dark green counties have the lower cost of living. You've heard me talk about the cost of living index before. The cost of housing insurance, taxes, groceries, utilities, transportation, and a few other things for each state are adjusted so that the national average works out to be 100. Anything above 100 is higher than national average, and numbers below 100 or less. For perspective, New York's cost of living index is 148.2, which means it's nearly 48.2% more expensive to live in New York versus the national average, and California comes in at 142.2. Virginia's cost of living index in 2022 was number 31 in the nation at 102.8, meaning the state overall has a slightly higher cost of living than the U.S. average. If you said that Tennessee had a lower cost of living than Virginia, then you would be right. However, there's one issue that hasn't come into play so far that makes all the difference. Which area and cities are you talking about? Remember, these are averages for the entire state. You shouldn't decide which state to live in based on the general cost of living for the whole state. Don't write off an entire state if its cost of living is higher than others. You need to drill down to those areas that you're more interested in and see what their cost of living is. The differences can be night and day. Fredericksburg, which is in Northern Virginia, for example, has a cost of living index of 105.6. Virginia Beach area is 99, while Richmond is 96.7. In Central Virginia, around the Roanoke area, the index is just 90.8. There's a big difference between living in North Virginia near Washington, D.C., or Virginia Beach, versus Southwest Virginia near the Tri-Cities, our home. Know what the cost of living index is for the town of Abingdon, Virginia, and Washington County, Virginia, which is next to Bristol? 83.9. This is 16% less than the national average and 6% less than the state of Tennessee's overall cost of living. So if you move to Abingdon, Virginia, for example, your cost of living will be 22% less than if you lived in the Nashville area in Tennessee. Just like real estate, the cost of living is very local. By the way, Abingdon's cost of living is also lower than Washington County, Tennessee, where Johnson City and Jonesboro are located. So to summarize, the average cost of living for the state of Virginia is above the national average. However, Southwest Virginia, for example, is much less than the national average and even better than many parts of Tennessee. Area matters much more than just the state. If you need to be close to Maryland and Washington, D.C., just know that your cost of living is going to be much higher than the national average. If you're looking for a rural part of the state, you might just wind up with a lower cost of living than where you're living now. Now, on to the next con. The number 3 con to living in Virginia, home prices. In December 2022, the median sales price for housing in Virginia was $383,100, almost identical to the national average of $388,472. So if you're looking to save money on housing, Virginia is about on track with the national averages, but not below. Tennessee comes in less, for example, at $368,300. You've probably heard the term that all real estate's local. Averages don't mean a whole lot other than for a rough comparison. In this case, Virginia's median sales price is about middle of the road nationwide. Tennessee is lower at about $20,000 less, and other states are lower even yet. Just like the cost of living comparison, don't fall into the trap of letting your research stop at the state level. Dig deeper into the numbers and see what you can get for your money in the areas that seem most attractive to you before deciding. Back to our examples. The median sales price from our MLS over the past 120 days in Abingdon, Virginia is $240,000. In Johnson City, Tennessee, homes sold for just over $283,000. Number 4 con about living in Virginia, the weather. Virginia's weather will either be better or worse to you depending on where you're coming from and what you're used to, of course. It's all relative. So this could be a con, could be a pro. If you're coming from Alaska and trying to get away from all the snow, then living in Virginia could be just what you're looking for. The 3 most common weather questions we get asked are, is the humidity bad? Do you get tornadoes? And how much snow do you get? Well, it depends. There's a big difference in the weather between Southwest Virginia, Central Virginia, and Coastal Virginia. Now, southern parts of the states also can be quite different than those to the north. Part of the state is pancake flat, while part of the state's mountainous, and then you have the coastal region. So we'll go over each of these common questions and answer based on what part of the state we're talking about. First, the humidity. Being a southern state, we do have higher humidity in the summers. 69% is average humidity for the year in the state, for example. Humidity is much lower and tolerable than in the more southern states like Mississippi and Alabama, not to mention Florida. It's a blessing and a curse if you're coming from a particularly dry climate. The spring and summer rains are one of the things that make the state so green and lush, and it's a great state to garden in also, but those rains bring humidity, like most of the southern U.S. If you want to avoid those miserable heat index numbers, best to pick areas in the higher elevation and near the mountains. Here in the Bristol area, in the southwest corner of the state and near the mountains, the average high is 84 during the summer and the average low is 62. A perfect temperature if you want to open the windows at night. As an example of how other parts of the state can differ, the average high during the summer in Fredericksburg, which is in Northern Virginia, is 90. A big difference, especially when humidity is high. Richmond, Virginia is in line with Northern Virginia with the summer highs and lows of 90 and 69, while along the coast in Virginia Beach you can expect 87 and 72. Much more comfortable the further south you go and the closer to the mountains you live. During the coldest months of winter, the average high and low is 43 and 23 in Abingdon and Bristol. Moving further north to Fredericksburg, the winter high and low is 45 and 23, pretty much the same as we see in Southwest Virginia. Richmond, Virginia is just a touch warmer at 47 and 28, while along the coast of Virginia Beach you can expect 49 and 34. So average highs across the state differ by roughly 6 degrees during the summer and 6 degrees during the winter. I've had a lot of out-of-state buyers ask about tornadoes, and the state does get some tornadoes, as has nearly every state in the U.S. at some point. Looking at the National Weather Service data over the last 70 years, on average, the entire state sees 18 tornadoes a year, which puts it in the middle of the pack when you're ranking states. However, for comparison, the states with the number 1 and number 2 number of tornadoes on average are Texas and Nebraska, and they have 155 and 96 per year respectively. 18 is pretty low compared to those high-risk states. So yes, Virginia does have tornadoes. Your likelihood of being directly affected by one, however, is extremely low no matter what part of the state you pick. The areas surrounding Richmond and Washington, D.C., plus Norfolk do have the highest risk statewide, but compared to much of this part of the country, the risk is far lower. So how about snow? If you don't like snow at all, then stick to the more eastern and coastal regions of the state. Abingdon averages about 12 inches of snow over an entire winter, same as Richmond, while Virginia Beach averages about 8 inches a year. So if you like the look of snow, but don't want to be running a snow blower and shoveling snow off your roof, Virginia's a pretty safe bet. So there were some negatives about living in Virginia. Let's move on to the pros of living here. Number 1, taxes. Again, we covered taxes as one of the cons and talked about this a bit, but all the tax news in Virginia isn't bad, especially compared to much of the U.S. Although Virginia has a state income tax, some other taxes are very low compared to many parts of the country, including the sales tax. Virginia has the 10th lowest combined sales tax rate in the nation, with an average statewide value of 5.63%, which includes the average local sales tax. As far as property taxes go, Virginia is ranked number 18th in the U.S. when looking at the lowest property taxes. Virginia is slightly behind Tennessee here, with a property tax rate of 0.82% versus Tennessee's 0.71%. Again, the rate is one thing. The actual impact on your bottom line depends on your home's value. The states of Virginia and California have similar property tax rates, for example, and are number 18 and number 15 in the nation with 0.82 and 0.76% respectively. But thanks to property values, the average home price in California being 2 or 3 times that of a home in Virginia translate to you paying an average of 2 or 3 more times of property tax if you live in California. New York's property tax rate is nearly double that of both Tennessee and California at 1.72%. We're beginning to see more people moving here from Texas also, where the property tax rate is the 6th highest in the U.S. at 1.8%. Number 2 pro, living in Virginia, outdoor activities. Virginia gives you a lot of options. Depending, of course, on what part of the state you pick, you can live near the mountains, in the Shenandoah Valley, or along the Atlantic coastline. Virginia's coastline stretches 200 miles along the Atlantic from North Carolina border up to Chesapeake Bay. But the coast isn't just about the beaches. There are also wetlands, estuaries, and lighthouses that will make it a great place for birdwatching, boating, and kayaking. The Virginia coast is a mixture of natural beauty, cultural heritage, and modern attraction that make it a must-see. The Shenandoah Valley, in the more central and western part of the state, stretches roughly 140 miles. It's known for its scenic beauty, including rolling hills, forests, and the Blue Ridge and Allegheny Mountains. The Shenandoah River runs through the valley and is popular for fishing, kayaking, and tubing. Like much of Virginia, the area is also rich in history, with many sites relating back to the Civil War, including battlefields, museums, and historic homes. The Shenandoah Valley is also known for its agriculture, with crops such as apples, grapes, and other fruits and veggies. The region is a popular tourist destination too, with a variety of outdoor recreation, cultural attractions, and scenic drives, making it a great place to explore. Then you have our southwestern part of the state. We have the Blue Ridge Mountains, lakes, rivers, streams, so you have boating, swimming, water skiing, bass and trout fishing, and they're all going to be within a short drive. If you like to hike, some of the best trails in this part of the country can be found in Virginia. 544 miles of the Appalachian Trail are in Virginia, the most of any state. But some of the best trails can be found in and around the small local communities throughout the state. The state's many Rails to Trails projects give you plenty of options also. Okay, the number 3 pro living in Virginia, the rich history and culture. Virginia has a rich history and culture that dates back to the early days of American colonization. Virginia is home to several historic sites and landmarks, including Colonial Williamsburg, Monticello, and Mount Vernon. The state was home to several key figures in American history, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, and has a lot of historic sites relating to the founding of the country. Virginia was also a major player in the Civil War, with several key battlefields, museums, and historic homes that help tell the story. But beyond its historical past, Virginia also has a thriving arts and culture scene with museums, galleries, and performance spaces showcasing local artists and musicians. You can also find traditional crafts like pottery, quilting, and woodworking. Plus, there are plenty of historic homes and plantations to check out, giving visitors a glimpse back into early American life. With so much to see and do, Virginia has become a must-visit for anyone interested in history and culture. The number 4 pro of living in Virginia, the growing economy. Virginia's economy is strong and made up of many different types of industries like tech, manufacturing, finance, and government. There are some big tech companies like Amazon. There's Capital One at Northrop Grumman that are based in Virginia. The state also has a big military and government presence like the Department of Defense and NASA. Virginia is a major hub for international trade with ports and airports that bring in and send out international goods. The state is also a big producer of crops like peanuts, soybeans, and tobacco, as well as livestock like poultry and cattle. And a growing number of tourists visit Virginia each year for its historic sites, the beaches, and the outdoor recreation areas, which helps the economy. With all these different parts working together in a highly educated workforce, Virginia's economy is still growing and it offers many opportunities for success. Okay, the fifth reason you might want to live in Virginia: access to major cities. Virginia is located near several major cities, including Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Richmond, providing residents access to a variety of cultural, educational, and career opportunities. Of course, it depends on where you live in the state. For example, driving from our part of the state will take about 5.5 hours if you want to get to Washington, D.C., and 6 hours to Virginia Beach. You can get to the city of Charlotte, North Carolina in about 3 hours. If you live in Eastern Virginia, the drive can be quite short. So, now we've covered some of the pros and cons of living in Virginia. How about a closer look at one of our favorite Southwest Virginia towns, Abingdon? This little town is only 20 minutes from Bristol and gives you a great example of the best the state of Virginia has to offer. Click here to watch the video about Abingdon that we put together for you. So, that's it. 4 cons and 5 pros of living in Virginia in 2023. I hope you found value here. Kim and I specialize in helping buyers who want to relocate to our area, and we're here as a resource if you need us. I'm Scott Henninger with the Home Team, brokered by eXp Realty. If we can help you in any way, just reach out to us. Kim and I would love to tell you more about why we call Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia home.